Hello, welcome to Coming Out and Beyond LGBTQIA plus stories and support. My name is Amory Zanzel and I came out later in life. I am a lesbian, ordained minister, a mom, a partner to a wonderful woman, and I coach people through the coming out process later in life. I created this series because I believe that through stories and story sharing, we can learn, discover, and connect with each other. Listening to other stories can often help us to hear our own. My guest today is Megan Summer. Megan Summer came out later in life. She is a mom of 4 kids and she lives in New England. And she's also a clinical social worker. That's what she does for a living. Hi, Megan. How are you today?
Hi, I'm great. I'm doing really well. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for coming out on the podcast today. So, Megan, tell me your story.
So, my story is that I have always known that I was gay from a very, very young age, but I didn't have the language at a very young age. I just knew I was obsessed with women and girls and wanted to ingratiate myself as much as I possibly could with all the girls all the time. And that I was physically attracted to girls at a very young age. I knew that, but again, like I didn't have the language. This was 30 years ago. There was no Ellen. I grew up in rural Ohio. There were no role models. I didn't know anybody gay, male, female. I knew Three's a Company where Jack Rhoder got made fun of for
Because being a gay man.
Yeah, exactly, where it was just like characterized. So I knew that I felt different. I knew that I was attracted to girls, and then left and went off to college. And again, like just anything I could do to get my hands on like women's issues. I was president of the Women's Center. I worked at Project Women. I majored in women's studies. I just wanted to be around that as much as I possibly could. But and at that point in time, this was the mid to late 90s. There was a little bit more awareness, a little bit more exposure, but still it was still Ohio. It was still not, I had some friends that came out and I was just like in awe of them and I thought it was amazing, but still just I couldn't. I didn't have the courage and I didn't there and I one thing I knew even more than being gay was that I always wanted to be a mom. I always wanted to have kids. And back then that was definitely that was not happening. I mean, gay women were I think there was a court case I was like that a woman had her kids taken away with her mom adopted them, and like there's all these horror stories. It's scary. It was terrifying. The prospect for me to come out at that point in my life was terrifying to me.
Question of curiosity: did you explore it at all at college? In college at all?
I didn't. In college, I dated the captain of the football team all 4 years.
How small? How big was the school? Where did you, do you want to say where you went? You don't have to.
I went to Wittenberg University, which is a small liberal arts school in Ohio. About 2,000 students. Very lovely. I had a wonderful time. I led the first Take Back the Night rally. I was very involved in all the feminist stuff that I could possibly do. And tried to get to know as many gay people as I possibly could, and like wanted them to sort of see me without like actually like I wanted them to read my mind. I wanted somebody to
but I also think it's like one of those things where we want to be with our people.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times I joke about it is like, when I was, not out, if I came into a room and there was some gay people there, I'd be like a moth to the flame.
Absolutely. And I remember verbatim every conversation I ever had with a gay lady in college. Like I just would replay them and just think about them, and it was just it was I knew all of those things, and yet I still like that the pull of compulsory heterosexuality was just so strong, and just my family was very conservative.
Religious?
Not religious, but just
Politically conservative.
Yeah, politically conservative, yeah.
So you used a word, and I'd love for you to explain it. What is compulsory heterosexuality? Not everybody knows that.
So to me, and I think it was Audre Lorde who might have, like, explored this a little bit,
Mhm.
um,
He
but
actually used she used another term, and it'll come to me, but go on.
okay. So when again, like, I studied, like, every gay lady I possibly could in college and wrote about, about lesbian imagery and Christina Rossetti's poetry and just like everything I could possibly do to get right there close, but not actually take that leap. But anyway, like compulsory heterosexuality to me just meant like there were no options. Like
Mhm,
there was no the other was so far the other that it just didn't even seem to be an option for me.
mhm,
And the scariness of coming out to my family at that time of you know, never having children, of being ostracized. You know, had just looked to put an amendment to the Ohio Constitution banning same-sex marriages. So there was, you know, a big, you know, just people saying horrible, horrible things about gay people. And it's
mhm,
like, would I really, do I really want to be in that group? If I can pass and not, and I
mhm,
can date guys and I
mhm,
can date a lot of guys and that's, you know, it was easy on some levels. I mean, it was some things are hard, you know, you're hiding a part of who you are, but you know, the more you hide it and the more you push it away, you can kind of forget about it. And I
mhm.
also could convince myself that it didn't matter.
Right. And then what happened? Then the next part of the story is you graduated from college,
Yeah,
and worked for a while.
I
And
worked.
then,
I
yeah.
went to grad school and at Ohio State, and I was there, and I had a relationship with a woman,
Mhm,
um, and it was wonderful, but it
mhm,
was really, really scary.
mhm,
And maybe because it was so wonderful is why it was so scary and it felt and it was unfamiliar
mhm,
um and then probably 6 months into that relationship, I met my soon to be husband and he lived in New York City. He was best
mhm,
friends with my sister's husband.
mhm,
So I would go to New York City to visit them and I met him and he was so like safe and
mhm,
just like he was a bit older than I was. So
mhm,
he had all his shit together and like a real career and very
and
solid foundation. And I
mhm.
was getting into my late 20s at this point.
Well, yeah, and he also was somebody your family would approve of.
Oh my gosh, a nice Jewish boy from Long Island? Absolutely.
They were so
Absolutely.
happy you found him.
Oh, and yeah.
Quick question, were you out of the relationship with the woman that you were in a relationship with when you met your husband?
It was kind of on again, off again. She was with somebody also, and it was just sorta it was messy at the
Yeah.
time. We were young, we were going out to all the bars that because that's where you meet gay, you know, you hang around with gay people
Mhm,
or going to all the gay bars and the gay clubs, and it's kind of a messy time too.
mhm,
And then they think that also, like I looked at my, you know, this person, you know, in New York City, and it was like, oh, like he's so safe and stable, and here I am, kind of going a little out of control, and
mhm,
you know, I loved my job and I really did love Ohio, but then there's also like, wow, like I can live in Brooklyn,
mhm, mhm,
and sort of run away from all of this and like start a new life and like, you know, start a family. That's what I want to do. And
mhm.
I can, you know, this doesn't, it does, again, it didn't, like I could convince myself that it didn't matter, that
Right.
being gay just, it didn't matter.
Well, you can put it up on the shelf and forget about it.
Yeah, for sure. Compartmentalize that.
And yeah, and we both know that really doesn't work because it keeps showing up.
It shows up in anxiety, it shows up in depression, it shows up in substances, it shows up in unhappiness, it shows in anger.
Mhm. Yeah. And
Yeah,
that's the thing is that we think we can put it away and we can't because it
right.
shows up in other ways,
It's
you
a
know?
fundamental part of my identity, of your
Right,
identity, of our identity.
right.
And to deny that, you can, but it's deny a part of who you are and just shove it away and pretend it doesn't matter. It just doesn't work.
Mhm, mhm.
Um,
So you got married and
so
had
I,
Bunch of kids.
bunch of kids, because if I'm gonna do it, man, I'm gonna get an A plus and I'm gonna be an overachiever and I'm
So
gonna
both Megan and I are mothers of four. So
yeah.
we are overachievers.
Right. Right. I'm gonna attachment parent and breastfeed till they're, 3 years old, and I'm gonna do this thing until
Yeah.
because that's what I'm gonna because that's my lot in life now. And so yeah, I had a bunch of kids. I had a pretty significant health crisis um in 2015, and my husband definitely like took care of me and took care of the situation. And um and then I went back to my college reunion, my 20th
Mhm.
college reunion in 2018, and reconnected with that woman that I had been with,
Mhm.
and just not physically, but just like, oh, how have you been? How are things? Um, and so then after that, we would call and we would text and talk, and she's like, how are you married to a man? You're gay. Like, I don't get how that works. And she had
Mhm.
been out, in her
Since,
20s. Yeah,
yeah.
she had been, and she was somebody who was also she was engaged to a man in her 20s and came out, a
Mhm.
little bit like nowadays would be considered coming
Mhm.
out a little bit later.
Mhm.
Um, and so she would talk about like what it was like for her to come out to her, fiance at the time,
Mhm.
and how painful that was and just what that was like. And I was like, in the beginning I was like, well, it doesn't matter. Like, I know I'm gay, but it doesn't matter. It's not, I can hide it. I'm a mom. I have 4 kids. I live in the suburbs. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I haven't
Mhm.
worked in 10 years.
Mhm.
I have no, my income potential is very, very limited right now. I missed out on the best career earning years of my life by being a stay-at-home mom. Um, it was never anything that I ever wanted to do, but you just sort of fell into that role. And
Mhm.
um, so, and then but then I'm like wrestling with it, and she's, we're just talking, and then I go and I make my very first appointment ever with a therapist. I had been a therapist like all these years, prior to marriage and then during marriage and then after for a little bit, and I never had gone to one myself.
Mhm.
And I found my therapist who said was LGBTQ
Friendly.
friendly. I don't think I think it was just that along with a whole host of other things. And I went in and I was so nervous and I'm handing her my copay and I'm shaking, and then I just start bawling in her office.
Mhm.
And I tell her, that I'm married and I have 4 wonderful kids and my husband is a very kind man, and that I'm gay.
Mhm.
And just like, how can I reconcile all of these dichotomies? And she she's like, Megan, I feel like I'm looking in a mirror. She's like, I was sitting exactly where you were sitting
Wow.
15 years ago
Mhm.
when I came out to my husband Michael, who was chief of police in our, and had 2 very young kids. And she told me her story, which I thought was pretty amazing for her to be so open and honest. And that is really what helped me. Like, if she had been just one of those sorts of therapists who was, very close it off and, oh, tell me more, and that's interesting, and have you thought of it this way or that way, but she like told me her story and opened up and showed me that there could be another way,
Mhm.
that I
Mhm.
that it is important. She showed me that being gay is an important part of who I am.
Right. Right. And isn't it interesting that you like the universe sat you down that day in front of somebody who had a very similar experience. It was
Yeah.
almost like I find that sometimes when we open this part of ourselves up, the universe moves incredibly fast. And here you are starting to open and you meet a therapist that came out 15 years before. Like, what are
Yes,
the chances of that? Like
absolutely.
all my mentors were lesbians.
Yeah.
Even when I wasn't out, I mean, they were all like I kept getting the universe kept putting lesbians in my path.
Yeah.
And and me and my effed up thinking at the time was like, maybe I just think I'm gay because I'm friends with so many lesbians. Just looking for any excuse because I was scared. Like you, I had a lot of privilege. I had I had, I had been back to work for a while because I'm older than you, but I had been back for work for a while. But I, like you, I'd lost my prime earning years. I was worried
Mhm.
about money and finances and all those things. Really, nothing that doesn't have anything to do with our sexuality, but it's one of those things, but does have to do with divorce, right?
Right, it's
Yeah,
very scary, it's
it
very
is
scary.
super scary. Quick question for you. So, in the groups that Megan and I run in, we talk about something called a catalyst. And usually, as a catalyst, is a person, that, awakens you up to your sexuality. But I also argue a catalyst is a life event. You know, you mentioned being very ill in 2015, and sometimes it's a divorce. Sometimes people get divorced beforehand. Sometimes a parent dies, a child dies. Some very significant life event can be your catalyst. Do
Mhm.
you think your illness was a catalyst for you? Did it make you reevaluate your life?
I think so that's interesting that you mentioned that. I do think that, my illness it does kind of make you so it was a brain tumor. I had a
Mm,
brain tumor, and I went down to Duke University and had an operation there, had a craniotomy, and then spent 2 weeks down there getting better before coming back up to my family. So I mean, I think it definitely does make you realize life is really freaking short,
yeah.
and it's really short to spend it hiding a big chunk of who you are.
Mhm.
Um, but then, I mean, what I find out also interesting about you mentioning that about an event being a catalyst was that right prior to me going to back to Wittenberg, I had taken part in this storytelling event.
Mhm.
They did this fundraiser for the school where people, just local people from town would get up and tell their stories. And like I am petrified of public speaking, and I always
Mhm.
felt like it held me back in my career and it held me back at school, and I'd always been really it had been a
Mhm.
big fear of mine. And I was like, man, if anything's going to get me over a fear, it's going to be
Mhm.
getting up in front of 600 people and telling an intimate story, with no
Wow, that's
notes or
pretty brave of
anything.
you.
So I did. I signed up or I auditioned, I guess, and to tell this story about joining the National Guard because I
Mhm.
thought it was like a domestic Peace Corps when I was in my late 20s, but really it was probably just because I wanted again to be around women. Um, and I didn't say that about being around women in the story. It was just, it was in the National Guard and just how it was kind of like not a good fit, but it ended up being a really amazing experience. So I did. I got up and I told that story, and like that was the first thing that I had done that was mine and on my own since being married, really, and since
Mhm.
leaving Columbus. And that was the first thing that I had done to sort of look inward and sort of examine my life in a way, and also to do something that was just mine, and just the
Mhm.
self-confidence that I got from that I could do something like that, like
Mhm.
holy cow, like that's so I think that event too was a big piece of the puzzle, or a big piece of how I was able to sort of even gain the self-confidence to reflect
Mhm.
and to not be scared of those reflections.
Did you find that when you went to tell the story and you had to leave out pieces of it, were you aware of that at the time?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a part of the story was about a woman who, or one of I mean, they were all so young. I was 27 when I was in the National Guard. Everyone was
Yeah.
like 17 to 18 years old.
And you were the
And
old lady.
oh my gosh, thank God they gave me like extra time to run the mile and stuff, or 2 miles. Um, so there was somebody there who like had hooked up with another girl in our barracks. And I
Mhm.
remember just being like enthralled by that. Like,
Mhm.
how like amazing, and just wanting to like, get to know her better, and just always those stories, every single lesbian story that I'd ever heard in my life, I just was like, I latched onto.
Mhm. Because I relate to that in a lot of ways because so Pulse happened when I was in the process of coming out.
Oh,
Um,
geez.
so the first time, so I was preaching at that point because I was working as a minister, and so I told this like this the Sunday after Pulse. It happened on a Sunday, but then following Sunday, um, I told a story about. about how gay people think of like their bars as sanctuary.
Yeah.
And so I talked about, like, wouldn't it be amazing to create a community, a faith community where gay people could feel safe as sanctuary, totally as an ally, totally as an so then I got asked to preach 4 months, like a couple of months later, next town over, which was more conservative, which is sort of funny, the next town over, more conservative.
Wow.
And I preached the same sermon. Um, and first of all, I talked a little bit about gun control in that, and somebody got up in the sermon and walked out, which,
Wow.
that's part, if you haven't had somebody walk out on a sermon, then you're not very good preacher.
Oh my
So, but that
gosh.
happened. But the funny thing is, after I got done preaching that sermon, got done with the service, and felt horrible, like
Ah,
so horrible. And it was in that moment, this was probably like about 6 weeks into my final coming out, that I realized I can never preach that sermon again as an ally. I have to
wow.
preach it as a lesbian woman or a gay woman. I didn't
Wow.
have a label for myself at that point, but I know that I can't preach it as an ally because I'm not an ally. I'm somebody who's a member of the community, and I have to preach it that way. I have to tell
Yeah.
that story that way. So I understand that. It was like I never thought about it until you said it right now, but it was like a big part. It was part of the whole process of me coming out,
Wow.
not being able to share my story authentically.
Right, and just not
Yeah.
feeling like you're really putting yourself, your whole self out
Mhm.
there, like what Brené Brown talks about when she talks about that wholeheartedness
Right.
and how you search for those, those wholehearted people. And
Mhm.
if you're living in the closet, you can never be that wholehearted person.
Right. And and to that, what I find a lot of times is the people that really suffer the most in our community, our later in life community, are people that are not fully out or fully
Yeah.
because once you start the process, and we call something called the messy middle, which is, the middle in which you're in the process of coming out as gay. And then for some of us, probably the majority of us, we're going through a divorce at the same time. um and it's funny and so we're doing both those things, and we're in this messy middle, right? We're in this messy middle, and we're trying to figure everything out, and it's so hard to do. So for you, you said something about the divorce. What has it been like for you to be in this messy middle where you're sort of half in, half out? You're past that, you're now out. So how did you survive it? How did you navigate those times of when you were going through divorce?
Oh man. I
It's
mean, I
hard
still
to
feel
tell.
like I'm in the messy middle. Like it's
Yeah.
still and the messy middle in a messy effing pandemic, which has just been really challenging, and it's slowed everything down too. Like if we hadn't been in pandemic times, I would be probably much further along for sure
Mhm,
than what's going on now.
mhm,
Um, so, it was trying to lean on family, leaning on the woman that I had reconnected with. I mean, we are now together. We're
mhm,
we're a family now.
mhm,
Um, and leaning on her a lot
mhm,
and, having her help me get through things. Poured myself into my work,
mhm.
find
Because
had
you had to probably too, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Mhm,
And just also like really loving that,
mhm,
loving my job and what I do and getting back into the workforce and earning my own money again. And
mhm,
that was hugely helpful. Moving into a new house and just settling in that way. Um, and just, taking it day by day. It really is a day by day kind of situation still
mhm,
for me now.
mhm,
Um, and I think that it will be for a little bit of time. It's hard, hard, hard stuff. I mean, I was in the closet for 30 years
mhm.
and I live in a conservative town. It's not like I can just jump into a gay community and be like, "Hi, I'm new here. Want to show me around?" um, I tried as much as I could. I did joined all the anything gay, I was down. Like if it's gay, I'm doing it in the
Mhm,
beginning.
mhm,
I went to this I'd never like meditated before, but there was this group in Boston that was doing a LGBTQ meditation, for half a day, a retreat. And I was like, oh my God, sign me up.
I'm
Like,
there.
I'll learn. Like, I'll do the crash course. I'll learn how to meditate,
Hmm.
all this stuff. And I'm like, I'll just chat up all these gay people and it'll be just amazing. And I get there and, I walk in and they're like, and they point to a sign and it's a silent retreat. It's like, oh man, I can't even talk to these. Like, we can't talk when we're eating. We can't talk when we're doing anything. I'm just like staring at all these gay people. Like, am I one of you? Am I not? And
So what
I think,
happened in that retreat? I'm curious. Did you, because it was a silent one, you had to do a lot
yeah,
of reflection. Yeah.
I was very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I was like sitting weird. I didn't know, like, I was trying to do the breathing. I mean, it was, the lovely, and everybody who could talk, like the people leading it were, lovely. And I got to, like, even just physically be around other gay people, just it felt good. But then again, I think, you and I have talked a bit about like that imposter syndrome
Yes.
too, how
Mhm.
sometimes you feel like maybe because I'm married to a man, I'm leaving this LGBTQ retreat and going home to my husband and 4 kids and 2 dogs in the suburbs.
Mhm.
There's just so many contrasts there. Um, and so you know, it did feel good just to physically be around other gay people and to just like see them in that space. But
But I think it's really normal to take a while to feel like you fit in.
yeah, yeah,
I think it's honestly, I think it's like I think there are people that feel immediately that way. But then I think sometimes it takes a couple of years to feel like you actually fit in and that this is your community now.
right, right. And I'm
Yeah.
constantly coming out,
Yeah.
to the moms of my kids' friends,
Yes.
to my friends, to family members, to, I'm on a steering committee trying to, have a little bit more diversity in town. And, we have this text thread going along and we're talking about this. Somebody had made like a homophobic comment at a school committee meeting and I'm talking about it. And I was just like, well, as a gay lady, da da
Mhm.
da da da. But then like, so I just came out to them and then it's like radio silence. And then I'm like, that vulnerability hangover, like, what did I just do? And
Well, yeah, but you also live in a small town and people probably know.
right.
Because that's how small town life is. Coming out in a
Yeah.
small town can be really let's talk about that for a quick second. What's it like coming out? I had that experience coming out in a small town. What surprised you?
Um, I think some of the people who you think are going to just be like 100% supportive and um, sometimes say the say things that can sort of be hurtful in ways that you're not,
Mhm.
that surprise you, I guess, or that just sort of go radio silence, or you just don't hear from people, or people that you think would always have your back are just like not necessarily there. And then there's other people who, like, people that I don't know very well. Like, I was at a friend's gathering and somebody that I didn't know very well, and I'm talking about, yeah, I'm separated, and oh, why, what's going on? I'm like, well, actually, I'm gay. She stood up and she like gave me the biggest hug and said, I am so proud of you.
Mhm.
And this was somebody I didn't know that well, but like
Mhm.
that kind of experience, that kind of response, um, was amazing.
So one thing you did mention was like how that lady stood up and gave you that big embrace. My partner always talks about the full embrace.
Mhm.
In that moment, she gave you the full embrace, which means that she just loved you and said, "Oh, I'm so happy for you. Congratulations." The half embrace is when the friend goes to you, "Oh, how are the kids?
Right. Right.
Oh, how are you and your husband doing around this?"
Yeah.
And I find that my first full embrace was by my kid's youth pastor, my youngest son's youth pastor, who just got up and said, "Congratulations." And like once I experienced that somebody just saying, "Oh, I'm so happy. You're so brave. You're so you're, good for you." Um, Once I experienced that, everything else paled in comparison. And so I get like when I got oh, I just was like, yeah, whatever. So
I know. I
yeah,
know. And
and
it's also
small.
that like coming out divorced too. I feel
Mhm.
like there's a huge stigma, like in this small town and in kind of conservative town, like the divorce part is sometimes more stigmatizing than the gay part.
Right.
Um, and the divorce, that's also, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. It's so hard." And I'm like, "It is, but it's also this, you know, this I'm finally living in my authentic life." Like that is something to be celebrated, and that is something to be um cherished like and and not mourned. It's
Hmm.
not all mournful.
Hmm. Well, I find that when, so my ex and I were in a small town where we were very well known, and the kids were, had gone through almost, high school. Some of my kids were in college when I came out. So, and what I found is that for a lot of people is that, yeah, it's about me being gay, but it was also about the divorce. It was more
Mhm,
about the divorce. And I found that people are afraid of people getting divorced in
mhm.
small towns because a lot of people are unhappy and they don't have the courage to leave their marriages. So they're just going to stick it out. I also feel like people think it's catching, and sometimes it is because I've seen friend circles where one friend group, one couple starts to get divorced, and then before 2 years is out, four of the couples in that friend group are divorced.
Absolutely, 100%.
And then another thing too is that sometimes for people, it's that they're really struggling with their sexuality on their own, and this scares them. And so sometimes that's why people pull away as well. And then there's also just good old homophobia.
Right.
Because the thing is I think we live it, like I remember telling my partner when I was, oh, no one's going to care up here. Like I'm in New England as well. I'm in Connecticut. Didn't think anybody in my very liberal small town that had a large gay community in it. But it's a weekender gay community, so people come
Oh,
on the weekends, and it's mostly male too, mostly
mhm,
male. And I didn't think people would care. And I was really stunned by the shunning,
mhm,
and it's sort of funny because, not funny, I don't want to use this word, but it's sort of, first of all, it's only temporary and you get through it. And I don't want anyone to be scared by this because Megan and I are sitting here on the other side of that part. And it's sort of like just sort of made you open your eyes to what people can do. And what has been amazing for me is that, you know, we talk about like not caring about what other people think and stuff like that. But until you've gone through an experience like this, you learn not to really care what other people think or say about you because that is a requirement to live as a happy, healthy gay person in this country. You have to not care what people think or say.
mhm. Yep, yep, and you are so hit it on the head by saying, until you go through that experience, you
Hmm.
don't you can give it lip service all you want, like, "Oh, I don't care what people think. Oh, I'm gonna,
Hmm.
paint my house this color. I don't care what people think." But until, yes, having this kind of an experience and really feeling that otherness and
Hmm.
really, like, you gotta own it. Like, if you can say you don't care what other people think, but when it happens, you do. The only way to really survive it is just to own it and just to really not
Yeah.
care.
Well, like with every difficult feeling we have, it's just like
Yes.
you got to
Yeah.
go through it.
Yes. You
It
gotta just
sucks,
sit
but
with
you
the
just,
suck and sit
yeah.
with the suck and just let it suck. And
And
then
then it
and then
passes.
and yes, and on the other side of that are deep, meaningful friendships
Hmm.
that I know are deep and meaningful, and for people who care about me and who love me and who will always be there for me.
Right. And I think one of the things is that I think, so this is the argue, this is like what comes first, the chicken or the egg thing. So I had a retreat once and like 8 women were there and they were all coming out. And it was funny because we started talking about, the straight mommy friends groups and how you make friends around your children
Mhm.
and stuff like that. And it was funny because we were all like, oh God, I really didn't like that. And they're like, you didn't like that? I didn't like that. And then all of a sudden, all of us start talking about our experiences of trying to fit in
Mhm.
to these groups that we didn't really fit into, and we kept, and then eventually you just give up and you're just not part of the groups. You're friendly with a person here or there, but you just don't, you're just not part of the group. And so my question is that because we were gay women trying to fit into straight society? And I
Mhm.
think for a lot of us it is. And so sometimes when we come out later in life, we often struggle with fitting into what our straight norms are. Like, I don't want to go shopping with you and have a girls' weekend. I just don't want to do that. Don't want to do that. Sometimes you think there's something wrong with you, but it's not. It's just that you're not with the right group of people for
Yeah.
you and your needs and who you are as a human being.
Right, right, absolutely.
And
And
that's the
it
blessing of coming out and getting divorced.
Yeah, yeah, and just being able to have, like, open and honest and true conversations. And,
Hmm.
like, I wanna talk about gay stuff all the time.
Yeah,
Like, I wanna talk about gay stuff all the time, and my straight mommy friends don't wanna hear about it. They
yeah,
don't wanna they don't want they don't and they certainly don't want their husbands to hear about it, and they don't want any of that.
yeah,
So yeah, it really is, finding that community. And it can
yeah.
be hard, when you come out later in life and you're not necessarily where you might be
Well, and also too,
geographically.
and we're in the middle of COVID. So any community and finding connection that it can be hard.
Yeah.
So I have a quick last question for you. I know you're in a long distance relationship. How do you navigate that?
So it's not easy.
Right.
um, but it's beautiful and wonderful. And we see each other as much as we possibly can. She's very
Mhm.
lucky that she has a really flexible job and can come out to see me as much as possible, because with my job I can't, and just family just stuff, it makes
Yes.
it very hard for me to go the other way. We do, as much as we possibly can. But we're committed to each other, and um it's not like anything I ever thought I would be my life story in that way, but you know it is, and so you just make it work.
Hmm. 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 So I have some questions for you. When you came out, did you have a coming out song?
So I definitely had, Gloria Gaynor's "I Will Survive" on
I,
repeat.
I had Destiny's Child. I'm a
Yeah,
survivor.
I I would
I
run to
love
that.
that song.
I know. "I Will Survive" was our kind of our unofficial sorority theme song that we would all s and, I feel like that time of life for me to be at Wittenberg and to be in that group of those really strong women
Hmm.
was the closest that I had ever been in my life to coming out, and
Hmm.
just being happy and authentic and doing what I wanted to do and having self-confidence, and loving that experience. And then so revisiting that song on this side of it and just really like the "I Will Survive," like really having
You
a
will.
different
You will.
meaning. And yes,
You will
for
survive
sure.
and thrive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, so a book or a movie that really changed your perspective on things, and it doesn't have to be gay stuff.
Well, I would say I don't like so post coming out, I read Untamed.
Mhm.
And before this, I had always gravitated towards Glennon Doyle,
Mhm.
always. And I had had another friend that she had come and like spoke, and um, I was always just sort of, just thought that she had an interesting story
Mhm.
pre Abby, and then I didn't know any of this stuff about post, Abby. And I remember I was at my kids' swim practice, and someone was saying, "Oh, this group, this we have this nonprofit, and Glennon Doyle's going to come and speak to it." And I was like, "Oh, let me just look her up." And like I, Wikipedia'd it, and then
Yeah.
the first thing is married to Abby Wap, and I was like, "Wow, what? What is
What
this?"
happened? What did I miss?
Yeah, and this was before anything, but I would, like just that story
Mhm.
of her coming out was very powerful.
Well, because it gave
Um,
you hope, I would assume.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes, yeah, and
And she
just
made a
like
lot of changes, and so you're like, "Hey, I can do this too."
right, and just it is hard, and that life is hard, and that's okay, and that's
Mhm.
life is beautiful.
Mhm.
and I wasn't having any of that. I wasn't having the hard and I wasn't having the beautiful. I was just floating and getting by,
Hmm.
and I thought that's what it was all about, and I
Well,
didn't
I thought
realize it's not.
well, and I thought it was really interesting because I know what it's like to raise a lot of kids at once, and you sort of lose yourself in that. Like I joke,
Yes.
I didn't think about my sexuality in my 30s at all. It didn't even occur to me because I was
Mhm.
so busy raising children. And what I found really particularly poignant about your story, Megan, is that when you went to that storytelling festival and like it was the first time in years that you had anything, like you just told a story about yourself that didn't involve your husband, didn't involve your children. It was just Megan standing up there. And that's okay that we do things for ourselves.
Mhm.
There's no like that's the thing is we see so many women struggle with, is it okay that I want to get divorced just because I want to get divorced? You know, and that doesn't have to be, sometimes people aren't gay either. They just are not happy and
Yeah.
it's okay. Like I think what we're trying to say to everybody, it's okay to do something for yourself that you need and you want.
Yeah, and even
It-
if you don't know what that is, but it's the not this. I don't know
yes,
even know what it is, but it's not this.
right. And I think actually Elizabeth Gilbert wrote a really nice piece called Not This. And
Oh, yeah.
yeah, and but it's true. It's like I'll never forget myself, like, it was, like, a couple of like, 3 or 4 months into my coming out, journey, and I was looking outside, and we had a group of friends over. I mean, I was still, just out to my husband and kids and a couple people here and there, and I remember, like, they were all getting together and they were talking, and my ex-husband perfectly happy doing that for the rest of his life. He would do that for the rest of, and I remember just looking out thinking, it was my not this moment, I mean, I just don't want this. And like I had been like I hear it in your story, we had been so acculturated, even though you're this big feminist in college, so acculturated that we're supposed to get married and we're supposed to have babies and we're supposed to do this and we're supposed to do that. And then you look out the window one day and you say, I just don't want this. And it was really hard for me to accept that it was okay for me to say that even though maybe somebody else wants that, but it's okay for me not to want that,
Right, right.
you
But
know?
as women, we are only told the narrative of
The
you marry the
patriarchy.
man, yep, you have the you get the house, you have the kids, the biggest compliment you can get as a mom is to be selfless.
Yes,
And I look at that now and think, why would I want my daughter to lose herself?
right.
Why would I want
Or
my own mom
your
to?
sons, or why would we
Yeah.
do that? And I think that's another thing that, I had a group this morning, and it is women that are in the beginning, so they've acknowledged their sexuality but they're just getting divorced and everything like that. So and yes, they're all just, and they're all older. I mean, they're in their 50s and 60s, and one of them said today, which was really, it was really poignant, and she always says something like this. um, she said, I realized I was trying to take care of my children, but what I was teaching them was to stay in places that were not good for them.
Mhm,
Like, she really, really worked hard to maintain this beautiful package of a family, and didn't get a lot of help from her spouse. And so she said, what I inadvertently taught them was not to have their needs met and to not, um, to live for other people. And
mhm,
she goes, I didn't want to teach them that, but I did teach them that. But she's made the changes in her life, and we were reflecting on her oldest daughter who is 20, who doesn't like buy into a lot of the stuff that she bought into, and she feels like she has a lot of hope for her daughter that she won't go down the same path of incessant caretaking, because her daughter
mhm.
has awareness when people are trying to manipulate her and stuff like that. So,
Yeah. It's a gift. It's a
yeah,
gift to give your kids
yes, it is a
that
gift.
message.
It's a gift to give your kids that it's okay for mom to be happy, because we always, a lot of the women that are in our circles worry, they have so much guilt and shame over leaving their marriages. And the thing is that kids really deserve happy parents.
Mhm.
and they deserve to have healthy emotional boundaries and taking care of themselves modeled for them,
Absolutely,
by the way,
absolutely.
not
Yes.
self-sacrifice and miserableness. So
Right.
my last question then is, what's the best thing about your life today?
My self-confidence.
Mhm, mhm,
I lost that for 15 years
mhm,
and lived through everybody else,
mhm,
and now I'm living for myself. Obviously, my children will always be prioritized, and I feel like by living an authentic life and living truthfully, that I am prioritizing my kids' needs in that way.
mhm, mhm.
But I would say that's the biggest change in my life and the best thing about my life right now. Like, I can fix my own toilet. I can
Are you a handy dyke?
I wouldn't go that far, but I know the right people
You
to
can put it
call.
back together. So, it's wonderful to hear that self-confidence. We met at the very beginning of your journey.
We sure did. You were the first person I called.
Yeah. Well, I'm honored that you were the I was the first person you called, and I love to see the self-confidence, and I love that you not only give that to your children, but you also give that to your clients as well.
Mm.
And you learn to listen to your own voice, and that is the greatest gift we can teach somebody else to do, so you'll be doing that for a lot of other people.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you for everything that you've done for me. It's been 2 years now, I believe, since I
First time
picked
I
up the
met you,
phone and
maybe?
called you, and I was terrified, and I didn't know how the technology worked, and I was scared that I was gonna get found out, and I was in a parking lot, and I was in between crying jags, and I thought I was gonna end up in a paper bag or a cardboard box on the side of the road, and I just could not visualize what my story could look like with a
Well,
happy ending, and you gave me just the calm, reassurance, and the understanding that there had been many people
done this before
who
you.
had done this before and came out on the other side happier, stronger, healthier,
Mhm. Well,
and I
and
needed to hear that.
well, that's the funny thing. I think the biggest part of my job is normalizing it.
Mm,
Normalizing
yeah.
it. Like, people will come and say, "Oh, this happened." I'm like, "Oh, that's normal."
I know, I
Normal,
know.
it's funny because, I talk to people in their cars. I talk to people in their bathrooms. I talk to people in their closets, literally.
Yeah.
And so the very first steps, sometimes people are so nervous and everything like that. So that's really normal. And I am really grateful that you reached out and we got an opportunity to meet each other, and it's been fun. Fun. It has been fun seeing you blossom. I know you had some really hard times, but it's really been fun to see been exciting to see where you're going. And you're not there yet. I mean, you're there, but you're not there. You know what I mean?
Still
It's
got a
definitely,
bit I certainly still have a ways to go. So and I can't wait. Like, I can't wait for the next part,
yeah,
what that looks like post-COVID and all this other stuff,
yeah. COVID
you
sort of
know?
sucks, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I wanna go to all these conventions that you're talking about and all that kind of stuff and all, like
You'll be there.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
All
So,
right. Thank you, Megan. I appreciate
thank
your time
you, Anne
today.
Marie. Thank you so much. This is a really, really important work that you're doing.
Thank you.
All right, take care.